The Eagles were a different team than the one that was here on November 18th. They were a team that you have reason to be proud of.
For a team that was pretty much left for dead after week 11, they really fought back and played great football down the stretch this season.
Love every one of you, man. The way you guys fought, battled, giving yourself a chance. That's what families do. That's what brothers do. Proud of you guys. Proud of you guys.
Coming off a Super Bowl championship, it would have been very easy for us to say this was not our year. But our players rallied around each other. They rallied around our coaching staff. You know, we've won 26 games the last 2 years, been in 5 playoff games. There's a lot of really good going on. Really special time to be part of this organization and be part of this city. We know we have a lot of work to do this offseason. We know we have to improve the roster. We're looking forward to that challenge, and we're going to get to work on it right away.
Well, after months of speculation, film study, interviews, the entire process, the journey to the draft is now no longer the journey, Fran. It is the destination. The draft day is here. We are soon going to see which prospects are joining the Eagles family. Welcome to Eagles Draft Central, presented by Dietz and Watson. I'm Amy Campbell, joined by Fran Duffy. Fran, I feel like it's the holidays when you put together your wish list and you speculate and you hope, but then you have that day where you get to open all the presents and see what you really get to play with.
That's right. The biggest difference, though, is that Howie Roseman, Joe Douglas, they've checked their list more than twice leading up to this day.
I'm sure that's the case. So I know you saw that awesome Eagles hype video we had to start off the show, and we have so much more content like that that'll be coming at you throughout the entire draft process. You can head over to PhiladelphiaEagles.com and all of our channels for all of that exclusive behind-the-scenes content that you are not going to see anywhere else. And Fran, we are going to have quite a busy night tonight. Actually, we are going to be we're going to be answering some fan questions on Facebook at around pick 10. You can join us, send your questions, and Fran and I will be talking all draft-related questions. So be sure to join us there. And of course, the Eagles have the 25th pick. So Fran and I are going to be back in the seats live to analyze the pick, slice and dice every which way. And it doesn't stop there. We have 3 days of coverage. So every night we are going to have a pre-show. We are going to be talking draft, and of course, every time the Eagles pick, we are going to be live on all of our social channels, so be sure to tune in. Fran, do you have water? Do you have coffee? Do you have everything you need?
All the above. Ready to go. I think this is going to be a lot of fun. It's fun every single year, and obviously we bring all the coverage from every single angle. Like you mentioned, we've got access, exclusive interviews, behind the scenes, analysis. We'll be doing breakdowns here tonight as well. So we're hitting it from every single angle.
Well, you mentioned Howie Roseman and Joe Douglas checking their lists more than twice. Our Eagles insider Dave Spadaro had the chance to sit down with Howie Roseman, and here is that exclusive interview right here.
Howie, when we last spoke at the NFL's annual meeting, you talked about the transition from free agency into the draft, and then you went and signed and made the trade for Jordan Howard. Take us inside. How'd that deal come together?
Well, these trades sometimes take a period of time to happen, so you show interest in a player, and we had conversations starting at the Combine about Jordan. Really, we had inquired about that kind of player when we first acquired Jay. So we had looked for that kind of fit last year, bringing Jay back and having him here. Didn't really necessitate the need to do that, but as we got into the offseason, knowing Jordan, knowing what kind of person he is, knowing his fit for us, and the skill set that he has that balances and complements the skill set of our other backs, it was something we were very interested in doing, and we were fortunate to be able to make a trade with the Bears.
So what is the fit? Describe what he brings to the offense.
Well, he's the third, since he entered the league, he's third in rushing yards in the National Football League over a 3-year period. That's pretty impressive. And he's an impressive person. He's got great work ethic. He's got vision. He runs hard. He can catch the football. I think there's a perception that he can't catch the football, but he can catch the football. And he really fills a role that we look to have every year in this offense. And having somebody who can fit our scheme and also provide that sort of skill set.
How would you kind of sum up, Howie, everything that the Eagles have done in free agency, kind of put it into one neat package for us?
It's a good start. You know, we look at the off season as something that doesn't really end until we play our first game and the opportunity to continue to improve the roster, and then you get another couple of opportunities during the course of the season. But it's got to all come together, and the draft process is a big part of that as well. So we're very excited about the guys that we've added to this roster in trades through free agency, but we're hungry. We're hungry to add more. We're hungry to add more talent. We're hungry to improve the roster.
Do you feel like you go into the draft absolutely not feeling a need at any position?
Well, Dave, you always go into the draft kind of with a wish list, and say, hey, I hope we come out with this. But at the end of the day, what we do is we make sure that we check each other on that and that we're staying true to our process. And that starts with really our draft meetings and making sure that we're really grading players based on their value to the Philadelphia Eagles, their value to the league in terms of what kind of players they become, as opposed to, we need this particular position right now, let's raise this guy up so that he comes through on the draft board.
It's really interesting in a league of change, you've kept the core together 3, 4, even longer years. How has it happened? What's the strategy? And is that kind of the mantra you want to work with in this organization? Yeah,
the strategy is to keep people together, to have continuity. When you have continuity, you can build layers. Look at it like a layer cake. And so if you have this continuity, you're just building on top of it. If you start taking out layers of that cake, you have to start on the foundation, and you got to build it back up. So our goal is to have core Eagles, and we have a lot of them. Our contracts are such that we have a lot of players, a lot of our good players are under contract, are under long-term contracts. And that starts with the draft and drafting guys and then re-signing them before they hit free agency. Sometimes when they go to free agency and making sure you get them back. But we're going to look at every avenue to try to accumulate talent and try to get more of those core Eagles.
We are finally here at the biggest weekend of the off season. What is it like for you? Kind of take us through the, minute by minute, hour by hour of it.
It's so fun. That's really what it is. The season itself, there's adrenaline, there's excitement, but there's also anxiety. You're going to play a game, there's a winner, there's a loser. We've been fortunate to win a lot more than we've lost the past few years, but in this, you're just adding talent, you're just adding people that you spend the whole year keeping your eye on, evaluating, talking about, and you work that whole year for, in this case, at this moment, 7 picks, 7 chances to take names off that board and call that player and add them to your culture. And then, you got undrafted free agency after the draft as well. But it's just a sense of pride for your staff who've done all this hard work, who've set the table for all of us. And it's fun. It's just a continual fun weekend.
Do you remember when it first started for you? Was there an overwhelming feeling of everything that goes on around making the picks?
Yeah, I think there's 2 parts of it. There's first getting into the National Football League, and they put me on the phones to New York, and that was kind of my first experience, my first draft in a draft room, and that was a long time ago. And just kind of going through that, I remember worrying about misspelling the name or getting the position wrong as we did that. And then there's the excitement now of just, at the end of the day, calling that same phone line and making sure that they get the name right. And, the minute that we're ready to put that pick in and saying, let's dunk it and let's go. And looking at the reaction and watching the TV and knowing that guy's a Philadelphia Eagle.
So way back when, Andy Reid had you write down the name, pick up the phone and call into the league and say, we're going to draft XYZ player?
Yeah, and he'd say, Roseman, don't blow it. A lot of Rosemans don't blow it. And he continued to say that as I did my first draft as a GM in 2010. And, I think that it at every level in that room, there's excitement, there's energy. And when you get close to the pick, when you're about 3 or 4 away, you start getting kind of those moments. It's like game time. And you have your list and you kind of knock it out in order and the phone starts ringing and I think we do a great job of over the next period of time of going through all those scenarios so that we're not going, hey, we didn't anticipate this, what will we do here? And knowing that, hey, we're at 32, we have an opportunity to get a next year 2, move into the middle of the second round. These are the number of players that we thought would be there, some of who would be players that were in discussion at 32. Let's do this, let's pick up another 2. This is the game plan we had.
The other part of it, that romantic idea, is that you're on the phone constantly, this team, that team, hearing all these conversations, potentially making all these deals. True or false? Is it that kind of franticness?
A lot of the conversations are happening right now.
Okay.
These are conversations you're trying to touch base with every team and say, are you anticipating moving out of that pick? Do you want to move back? Do you want to move forward? And continuing some of that dialogue with teams to say, yeah, we anticipate wanting to get back into the first round. We anticipate wanting to move out of our pick in the middle of the first round and coming back towards the end of the first round and continuing those discussions so you have a framework in place. And I always think about our Fletcher Cox draft where we had these conversations with John Schneider a week before the draft, and I got on the phone with John the night before the draft and said, hey, if our guy's here, this would be the compensation. And John said, let's do it, and just call me when you're a pick or two away. They were at pick 12. At pick 10, we started to say, hey, we're on the same page. Our guy's still there. Pick 11, we stay on the phone. Pick 11 goes. Boom, we have a trade.
And it turns out to be one of the great players in Eagles history. Along with that roster continuity, you've kept your personnel staff, for the most part, largely together. You and Joe and Andy and many more. How has that helped you from year to year developing the roster?
Yeah, you start to understand what other people are thinking. It's easy to have difficult conversations, which you need to have. You need to have difficult conversations. Hey, here's a guy that I would really like at 25. Let's go through this guy. I know you're not as high on him as I am. Or the flip side, this would be a great pick for us at 25. Why are you uncomfortable about that pick? What makes you feel strongly about this? Let's watch him together. Let's talk about him. Let's talk about comparable situations where maybe the first year you're feeling out each other. It's like any relationship. And we have that not only with our personnel staff, we have it with a lot of our front office staff. We've been fortunate to add really good people over the last couple of years, newest one being Andrew Berry. We just have a lot of good people in the building.
Howie, what do you want Eagles fans to know about the state of the team and the direction that the Eagles are taking?
Yeah, first, really proud about the process we've had in place over the last couple of years and the success we've had on the field. It's a great tribute to the people in this organization and to our coaching staff and players. And I think that our fans know this, but we're going to be aggressive. We're going to continue to look at every avenue to improve this football team. We want to win. We want the confetti to fall on our heads again, and we will do whatever it takes to try to do that and ensure that that happens to the extent that we can. By the same token, we're not going to do anything that puts us at such risk so that 2, 3, 4 years from now, we're looking back and saying, hey, the decisions that we made in 2019 cost us 2 years in 21 and 22. So we're always trying to balance those things. It's hard because we desperately want to win right now. We want to win at the highest levels. We want to compete at the highest levels. But that's why we have these processes in place to try to make sure that we're not doing anything that puts us in a position where we're really going to have to sacrifice the future.
Howie, thank you. Good luck in the draft.
Thanks, Dave.
Well, one of the things that really jumps out to me about watching that conversation with Howie Roseman is just how much he lights up when he talks about the draft process. You can tell how excited he is. It energizes him, and he's just totally in his happy place when he's doing the entire draft process and everything that goes into it.
Yeah, all those anecdotes, whether it was about his first draft, working the phones, drafting Brandon Graham, the trade up for Fletcher Cox back in 2012, working with John Schneider, the general manager from Seattle. I think the biggest thing is this scouting staff, this front office, Howie Roseman, Joe Douglas, the entire team, they've been working 364 days to get to this point. And so they've got to be excited. You have to have a passion working in the NFL draft, and I think that certainly shows up.
Absolutely. It's a long road to draft day. And of course, we know one of the things I'm looking to see today is just what outfits these guys wear on the red carpet. That's one of my favorite parts. It's always part fashion show, part dreams coming true. So of course, day one, fashion, a big component of that. Here is a closer look at some of the Eagles' day one picks. Take a look.
I come from a town of about 1,000, so going from that to New York City was a big change, but it was fun. Had all my family with me and got to enjoy it.
There's just tons of emotions going on in my head from that being the night where really my life was changing, and it was just a really surreal moment.
Walking down the red carpet was very exciting for me. It was my first time doing something like that. I was very excited because my mom, she was with me and she got to enjoy that experience with me as well too. So we had a lot of fun.
It was the first probably red carpet I've ever been on in my life.
And just seeing all the supporters, and there's actually a lot of Eagles fans there as well. So really that whole weekend was pretty cool.
Meanwhile, the Eagles have been on the clock for 5.5 minutes.
The Eagles are on the clock. While I'm waiting, I'm just trying to be patient, trying to keep everything in, and it takes very long. And I felt like I was back there for a very long time.
Guys that might have to sit and wait and hear a bunch of names go first, that can be a long kind of, stressful, anxious-filled night.
The pick is in. The commissioner will be heading to the podium shortly with it.
With the 4th pick in the 2013 NFL Draft, the Philadelphia Eagles select Lane Johnson, tackle, Oklahoma. The Philadelphia Eagles select Carson Wentz, Derek Barnett, defensive end, Tennessee.
When I get to the ring, it's just very exciting, and it's very loud, so I put my head down so I could hear. When I saw the area code, I was very excited and super happy.
To be honest, I couldn't really hear anything. I knew that the Eagles picked me just because people were screaming and they told me, but let's go. Put on my hat and walked across the stage, and that was it.
That walk from backstage, getting, hearing my name called, walking down across that stage to shake the commissioner's hand, still getting goosebumps. I got to look out in the crowd and see I had my buddies all in a section off to the side, and they were going crazy, and it was just an unbelievable moment, and I knew, really at that moment my life was officially changing.
Walking out on stage, meeting the commissioner, was a dream come true, and I was excited to be a part of a team because you're training for a couple months and you're just doing your own thing. You're not really on a team yet, so I was just very excited to get picked up and be with the organization, with the team, and get started.
It was just finally closure to the journey. You knew that your name was going to be called sooner or later, but it's a dream come true considering where I was in college. And then here I am now 6 years later in the NFL, so it all started that day, so it was crazy.
Congratulations! Way to go, Philadelphia!
Congrats.
Awesome.
There's a lot of excitement. I'm fired up, they're fired up, and I'm ready to go to work.
It is. It's very ironic. So right after I got picked, we went back and did a lot of media, probably for about an hour and a half.
That you just want to go celebrate with your friends and family, but you got to, hit the gauntlet. But it's also kind of a welcoming to kind of this new stage and new chapter of life.
So as soon as I walked off stage, I went to this little area, and then it was just media frenzy. I got a good gulp of that, and then it was into the van and to the hotel, and then went to the facility the next day.
It was unbelievable. You really realized your life was changing, and it was special for me to share that with my friends and family because they really helped me get there and they got to enjoy that moment with me. So it was an unbelievable night.
Congratulations. So happy to have you.
It all came so fast. I was really excited. I was really happy, but just people that weren't familiar with where I came from, I never played in college until I switched to tackle, and then all of a sudden in the NFL. So it was really just learning on the fly and just trying to gradually progress ever since.
I was like, damn, I'm drafted. Got a team, and we head back to the hotel and celebrate with my family and friends, enjoy the night, and then the next morning we came to the facility and got straight to work.
An awesome behind-the-scenes look at some of the Eagles' Day 1 draft picks right there. Coming up next, we will have an exclusive interview with Ross Tucker, Eagles preseason analyst, on some of the draft picks you need to know. You won't want to miss that. Coming up after the break. Dietz and Watson, Amy Campbell, Fran, Duffy, and we are now joined by Eagles preseason analyst Ross Tucker, coming to us from Nashville to talk about some of the offensive prospects in this draft that are super intriguing. And Ross, a guy that a lot of fans are talking about, running back Josh Jacobs from Alabama. Tell us more about this intriguing prospect.
Well, he's the only running back that people think has any chance to go in the first round. It's really an incredible story to think of a guy that was under-recruited from Oklahoma, and yet somehow Alabama gets him, so I don't know how under-recruited he really was. But he burst onto the scene this year. I mean, early on in college football, I don't think a lot of people even knew who he was. You knew about Damian Harris and even Najee Harris at Alabama, and then Josh Jacobs seemingly came out of nowhere, and to me, he's the total package. He's got tremendous change of direction. He runs low to the ground, breaks through tackles. He showed that he can be a big plus in the passing game. And I even saw some blocks from Josh Jacobs where he showed he is not afraid to stick his nose in there. That might be one area in pass protection he could improve a little bit, but overall, really, by far, in my mind, the best running back prospect in this draft. And he really only played this year, so not a lot of tread on the tires. Should be very fresh for whichever team drafts him. And it seems like there's a lot of teams in the 20s in particular that are very interested in Josh's services.
Well, Ross, let's talk about the receiver position, because I find that to be most fascinating, trying to follow the arc in terms of the interest in some of these prospects. And really, the two names that are at the top of this class, it seems like DK Metcalf from Ole Miss and Marquise Brown from Oklahoma. Obviously, two very separate body types. What are your thoughts on both of these guys and where they may end up come Thursday night?
Yeah, I mean, Fran, you mentioned those guys, and for whatever reason, I immediately thought of the movie Twins and Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito for some reason. I mean, it's unbelievable how different those two guys are. Metcalf, I saw where he said recently he doesn't like taking his shirt off. I don't know why. If I looked like him, I would take my shirt off every day, all day. He is a shredded 230 pounds. He actually reminds me a lot, Fran, if you watch him play right now, with the slants, the posts, and the go routes. He reminds me of T.O. He really does. He's that kind of player where it's his sheer physicality that enables him to win. But my preference is Marquise Hollywood Brown. If you look at the NFL, it's becoming more and more about guys in space, speed. You see guys like Antonio Brown's not a big guy. Deshaun Jackson, obviously, not a big guy. Hollywood Brown is that next guy where people just can't keep up with him. He's got some Tyreek Hill-like skills. People call him a Deshaun Jackson clone. He is going to be a big play producer for whoever gets him. I prefer Brown, but honestly, it's like flavors of ice cream. They're two totally different players. It really just depends on what each team would be looking for.
And talking about DK Metcalf there, let's talk about one of his teammates at Ole Miss, A.J. Brown, who I admittedly am totally obsessed with. I started covering him when he was a senior in high school, and I've been following his career ever since. I love this guy. Tell me more about this receiver from Ole Miss, a totally different receiver than DK Metcalf.
He is, and what's interesting is that DK Metcalf has gotten so much of the publicity, and his picture went viral. But there's a lot of people that think A.J. Brown is actually the better wide receiver prospect. He's certainly more versatile. He's played in the slot. He's shown he can play on the outside when Metcalf was hurt. I think he really increased his value by showing that he can do both. A lot of people think as a rookie, he'll be sort of that big slot guy. Think about guys over the years, Marcus Colston, Jordan Matthews, but he's very smooth, and he might not have the raw physical ability of DK Metcalf, but he gets open more. I mean, he separates more because he's a better route runner, which is the position. I mean, wide receiver is getting open and then catching the ball, and A.J. Brown does both of those very consistently.
Well, Ross, let's get to the position that is the most important position on the offensive side of the football. That's the offensive line. I think when you look at this class overall, there's the three names at the top, right? There's Jawan Taylor from Florida, Jonah Williams from Alabama, Andre Dillard from Washington State. Those three guys, I think most think are going to go in the top 15. So we really want to ask you about the guys at the next tier, but that potentially could go off the board in the second half of round one. And I want to start with a guy that's really a man after your own heart, Cody Ford, the right tackle from Oklahoma.
Yeah, I love Cody Ford. I like guys that are physical. You know, let's be honest, just blocking people, it's not really that fun. I mean, it's only fun if you're really trying to physically punish the guys you are going against, and that is Cody Ford. He's got tremendous size, maybe not great length. You know, he's 6'4", but he has pretty good length of arms. He moves well. He's not the guy that is the fleetest of foot. I think that you'll need to see some improvement from him in terms of one-on-one pass protection. But he actually reminds me a lot of the guys the Eagles have gotten over the years that maybe played college tackle and could probably play NFL tackle, but are better suited perhaps at guard. Guys like Jermaine Mayberry, Sean Andrews, Todd Harriman. You know, all those guys, the type of guys that played college tackle, moved into guard for the Eagles, but in a pinch they could bump out. That's Cody Ford. I think the value for Cody Ford is he could be your next guy at both guards and both tackle spots.
Well, we don't have to wait too much longer to see where all these guys actually end up. Ross Tucker from Nashville, thanks so much, and enjoy the draft.
I will. Thanks for having me, Amy. Take care.
Eagles Draft Central presented by Dietz and Watson, proud partner of the Philadelphia Eagles. All right, so Fran, really interesting stuff there from Ross. I think one of the big things that stood out for me was his take on Josh Jacobs not having a ton of miles on the tires, he put it. That sometimes has been a criticism of Josh Jacobs, that he hasn't had a season of over 700 yards at Alabama, but Ross really thought that was a positive thing for a running back prospect. So that was definitely really interesting to me.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the double-edged sword, right, when you're looking at a guy like Josh Jacobs, is that, yeah, the production's not there, and that's a little bit of a knock on him, is that, he's never rushed for more than 850 yards in a single season. But on the other side of the coin, he also doesn't have a lot of wear and tear on his body. And so when you look at a first-round running back, that's the idea, is you want that guy to last as long as possible. With a guy like Jacobs, who is that talented, you feel better about it considering his history. All
right, so we're going to shift gears. We've talked a lot about the offensive prospects in this draft. Let's focus on the Eagles. Let's talk about some of the transactions, the offseason transactions, the last time on Philadelphia Eagles, what you may have missed. So we'll start with some of the transactions. Of course, they added, a lot of their top guys.
Yeah, I think really you look at a couple of these ones here on this first screen, bringing back Rodney McLeod for an extension, and then also re-signing Brandon Graham, who was set to hit the free agent market. To me, that was the biggest move of the offseason, trying to bring back Brandon Graham, not having to go into this free agent market for pass rushers. To me, you look at all the money that was thrown around for guys like Zadarius Smith and Preston Smith. What we saw, Frank Clark get traded for a first-round pick this week by the Seattle Seahawks. So hefty price tags for pass rushers. To not have to do that and be able to keep one of your own in Brandon Graham, to me, that was one of the biggest moves of the offseason.
Absolutely, especially after he gave all of us a hug on that last day, and I was like, please, I hope I get to see you again. It'll be awesome to see him around the halls of the NovaCare complex. Another big one to me, I think, Jason Peters, at least back for one more year. The Eagles keep their star left tackle.
And again, I think when you look at a move like this and look at a move that extends Isaac Seumalo as well, that allows you to go into this weekend, Amy, where you're not forced to go one position or another. They don't have dire needs. So, bringing back, we talked about Brandon Graham, you bring back Jason Peters for another year, you extend Jason Kelsey, you extend Rodney McLeod, you extend Isaac Seumalo. That allows you not only to keep your own, but then also you don't have to go into a draft saying, man, we really have to address this position or that position or this position. I remember we talked with Lance Zierlein on the Journey to the Draft podcast last week from NFL.com, and Lance, talked about the Houston Texans. And the Texans, they've got to draft 2 corners, they've got to draft 3 offensive linemen. They have to. Those are the needs going into this draft. The Eagles don't have that situation. They don't have to address any one position. They're going to go in with a plan and let the draft board come to them, and that's an outstanding philosophy to have.
That is one thing that you keep hearing the front office say, we're going to let it come to us a little bit. And I think that's such a way to be drafting from riches as opposed to desperation. You don't have to reach for a guy. There's not as much of a risk, and you can be patient with guys that you draft to wait for them to develop. There's no need for them to play right away. So it's an awesome strategy, and I think it's going to be great to see the way that it all unfolds. And of course, I know Eagles fans are very excited to see that Deshaun Jackson is going to be back in the fold as well.
That's right. I guess when you get to this next screen and you can see all the different additions, certainly Deshaun Jackson stands out. Malik Jackson, the defensive tackle from the Jacksonville Jaguars as well. And you talk about those 2 players, the ability to impact both offense and defense. Big plays down the field from Deshaun, negative plays in the backfield for Malik Jackson. And then you get here to some of these moves that they made on the second half of this. Really,
a couple of new players.
Exactly right. You bring in a guy like LJ Ford, who's a young veteran in this league, has worked his way up the ladder there with the Pittsburgh
Steelers. He's got an incredible
Steelers.
Story.
Oh,
by
absolutely.
The way. Guy you really want to cheer for.
Exactly, and he's worked his way up. Like I said, can play special teams, can play on defense. So he's a player that a lot of people are excited about. You bring back a Ronald Darby to your secondary as well. I think this secondary, Amy, is going to be a fun group to watch. It's so competitive. It has been for the last couple of years, and I expect that to continue this fall.
Well, and you saw last year with all of the injuries that there are so many young guys who were very inexperienced but talented. Now those guys have that experience. There is going to be a lot of competition. It is going to be deep. Usually getting through that first year of those inexperienced guys can be a little bit rough. There's some growing pains, but then, man, do you have wealth and depth at a position that can be very scary for opposing offenses across the league. And then another former Eagle coming back, Vinny Curry. Everywhere we look, former Eagles coming back. I just love to see that. Guys love to come back to Philadelphia.
A huge addition to be able to bring back Vinny Curry, and then obviously trading for Jordan Howard for a day 3 selection. When you could bring in a guy that has been third in the NFL in rushing since he entered the league. I mean, that's an outstanding addition going into the draft. And so now, again, you're not having to force your hand, and that's a huge thing for this Eagles front office. And you got to give a lot of credit to all of those guys, everybody involved upstairs with what they were able to do this offseason leading into this weekend.
Well, and that's a perfect transition too. Let's take a look at our depth chart and look at that running back group. We have a nice list of guys here. Josh Adams was became the bell cow there throughout the season, but it was a position that was kind of up and down for the Eagles, as Eagles insider Dave Spadaro had mentioned that the running game was inconsistent to be able to rely on near the end of games, and so definitely going to be great to see Jordan Howard in the fold there, but a lot of guys coming back to compete.
Yeah, it's a young group, right? I mean, Josh Adams will be in his second year, Corey Clement will be in his third year, Wendell Smallwood in his fourth year. You have another young veteran in Boston Scott, another young guy in Jordan Howard, and then obviously Donnell Pumphrey, a former fourth-round pick. So it's a very young group, and I think they'll go in and try and compete. And I think you look at this receiving core as well, just a very competitive group, a very interesting position room, because you have guys like Alshon Jeffrey and Deshaun Jackson who are established veterans, right? And then you have some of the young players. Mac Hollins, nobody really talks about Mac, but because he missed all of last year, but showed great flashes as a rookie during that Super Bowl run.
I'm so excited to see Deshaun Jackson and Alshon Jeffrey together on the same field. I think that's going to be quite a dynamic duo. And some of the guys that they got from the AAF, I'm super intrigued by Greg Ward. I think some of these guys that are going to have a chance, those are going to be really fun to watch, especially Greg Ward. I loved him when he was in college.
That's right. And then really when you talk about adding a guy like Deshaun Jackson, it really helps the tight end group. And I think we'll look at this tight end group here in a sec. And it really helps open things up underneath for guys like Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert. The team brought back Richard Rodgers like we showed in the previous graphic. I think when you look at this entire tight end group, probably one of the one or two best in the NFL.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly that 1-2 punch for my money, Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert, that's number one in the league right now.
I don't think that is something that a lot of people would argue with, even if they aren't Eagles like we are.
That's right. And then you look at the offensive line. And again, this is one of the best offensive lines in football. Brandon Brooks coming off the injury that he suffered in the playoff game, but you look from left to right, and Jason Peters and Lane Johnson and Jason Kelsey. They bring back Isaac Seumalo, who's really coming into his own, and now in what will be his fourth year in the league. Some young players as well that we're excited to watch compete and develop over the course of this offseason. It's a very, very interesting group. Matt Pryor and Jordan Mailata on the back end of this roster. I'm excited to see if they do add to it. Okay, how are these guys all going to fit in? But ultimately, what they've got right now is going to be a really fun group to watch because, like we've mentioned, that defensive line, which we'll touch on later in the show, one of the best in the NFL. So watching those two groups go at it all summer is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think I was going to say watching those two young guys, especially Matt Pryor and Jordan Mailata, to see them take a step forward. Offensive line, such a developmental position. It always takes time. I'm really excited to see year two for both of those guys. And, of course, we have to talk about the quarterbacks. We know Carson Wentz will be on the field for the Eagles. They have got their franchise guy. Nate Sudfeld will be back again as well, and Luis Perez.
From the AAF.
Yes.
Luis Perez is an outstanding story. Chris McPherson wrote an outstanding feature on him when he first signed. I think when you look at both of these top two quarterbacks, and Carson Wentz, we know what Carson is, right? I mean, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. And then Nate Sudfeld has been the number 3 guy over the course of the last couple of years. he's ready for that number 2 job, and he's going to come in, and Doug Peterson's talked about he's going to come in and compete. We'll see if they do decide to add anybody else into that mix, or if he's going to compete with Perez. But Nate Sudfeld is going to come in. He's a guy that I've always liked going back to college. I was really excited when the Eagles brought him in late in the summer before 2017 season got started. To me, this is one of the best quarterback rooms in the NFL.
Oh, a lot of the best position groups in the NFL. That is a very thorough breakdown of the offense. We will be breaking down the defense just as thoroughly on the other side of this commercial break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Eagles Draft Central, presented by Dietz and Watson. Of course, you have your full offensive breakdown. We are shifting gears to the defense for the Eagles. We're going to go position by position, looking at the Eagles depth chart, and then we have some mock drafts that are out there. We know you're reading them, so we're taking a look at some of the guys at those positions that some analysts think might be a good fit for the Eagles defense. So we are going to start with the safety position. And Fran, when I look at this immediately, what jumps out to me, Malcolm Jenkins was a do-it-all player for the Eagles last year in that secondary, but it's always good to be looking for some young talent, especially when you have a great veteran presence already holding it down there.
Yeah, I think when you look at this safety group and you have Malcolm Jenkins, Rodney McLeod, in a vacuum, those two guys form one of the best safety tandems in the NFL. And you have Malcolm, like you said, a Swiss Army knife, really has been in that role for the Eagles since he arrived here in Philadelphia in 2014. Then you've got Rodney McLeod, one of the best pure center fielders in the league. He can come downhill and lay a hit on a running back. He can play sideline to sideline in the deep part of the field and make plays in coverage. So I think when you're looking at those two guys, they certainly present a very valuable skill set for Jim Schwartz, Corey Unlin, and the rest of this Eagles defensive staff. They add Andrew Sendejo in free agency from Minnesota. But when you talk about a guy like Rodney McLeod, he's actually a little bit similar to a player we're about to break down here.
Yeah, of course, Charles Davis from NFL Network has the Eagles taking a safety, Jonathan Abram.
Yeah, so I think when you look at Abram, here he is at the bottom of the screen, number 38 for Mississippi State. And this guy, Amy, he's a heat-seeking missile. You're going to see his eyes in the backfield. He keys on this misdirection here, sees exactly what's about to happen against Auburn, is able to defeat that block. He just moves at a different speed from the other guys on that defense. So when you look at what Jonathan Abram can do, his game is built all about speed and physicality and violence. He's still a little bit raw, but a lot of the things that you like from a physical standpoint, he brings to the table.
Heat-seeking missile, physicality, and violence. I love to hear that about his safety, and of course I love a DB from the SEC. We're going to keep it in the DB group here. We're going to take a look at the Eagles cornerback depth chart. We talked about this earlier, Fran. A lot of talent there in that room for the Eagles.
Yeah, it's just a very competitive group, right? I mean, whether you're talking about Jalen Mills or Sidney Jones or Ronald Darby, Rasul Douglas, a lot of guys that have played a lot of reps over the course of the last few years. We saw some rookies last year with Avonte Maddox come into the lineup and play a number of different roles. So when you look at this, going into the spring, going into the summer, competition brings out the best in everybody. And so having all these guys in the building, allowing them to go out and compete, it makes the whole group better. That's what we've seen, honestly, from this group over the course of the last couple of seasons. That will continue in 2019.
And we're going to take a look at another SEC DB cornerback, DeAndre Baker from Georgia. Todd McShay has the Eagles taking DeAndre Baker.
Yeah, what stands out about Baker, you see him here at the top of the screen, very instinctive. This is a three-man route concept from the offense, and they're trying to fool Baker, where they're going to try and send a vertical route his way, take him down the field, stretch the defense, right? That's what we always hear. So they're hoping that receiver that is matched up against Baker is going to take him down the field. But Baker does a great job in zone coverage. He sees what the offense is trying to do, and he squats on this route at the intermediate area of the field, explodes into the catch point for an interception. He's trying to take this back the other way. DeAndre Baker, very competitive, very instinctive. Those are two traits that you look for at the cornerback position in today's NFL. Not the biggest, maybe not the fastest, but does a lot of things really, really well.
Yeah, very instinctive, like you said, rangy. Not necessarily a big guy, but definitely a rangy guy who knows where to be on the field. Of course, we know that cornerbacks and safeties benefit from great D-line play, and the Eagles definitely have that. So we're going to look at the defensive tackle group now.
Yeah, well, certainly Fletcher Cox, one of the best, certainly, to do it for the Eagles. And I think when you look at Fletcher and you look at this defensive line, it's always been about trying to pair somebody with him, right? So what do the Eagles do? They go out, they get Malik Jackson here in free agency. And I know you're
so excited. I can't wait to see those two together on the field. I just get like goosebumpy thinking about it.
I mean, he's been one of the best interior disruptors in the league for the last few years. His ability, I go back to Tennessee when he was there with the Volunteers and he played D-end and D-tackle, was just awesome coming out of college. I was a big fan of Malik Jackson. Really excited to see how he pairs with Fletcher Cox on the inside. The Eagles also bringing back Timmy Jernigan right before the draft. So they've got a nice little trio there on the inside. Trayvon Hester, one of the heroes of the playoffs last year for the Eagles. They've got a lot of talent on the inside, but you can still add more talent. That's certainly something that's going to be on the table.
Of course, in looking at that defensive tackle group, we're keeping it in the SEC, and we're keeping it with Todd McShay, a different iteration of his mock draft. He has the Eagles taking a defensive tackle.
Yeah, and that defensive tackle is Jeffrey Simmons here, number 94, Fletcher Cox's old number there, and he's lined up as a one technique. Very rarely did you see him where he had the ability to just pin his ears back and go, and I think that's why a lot of people kind of project him to be a perfect one-gap tackle, the ability to just get upfield. That's the kind of scheme the Eagles play, obviously. Jeffrey Simmons hasn't been able to test this spring because of an ACL injury, but a freak show athlete, very, very disruptive, and was a big-time recruit coming out of high school. He's a guy that a lot of people are very high on.
Yeah, definitely a freak show athlete. Very well said there. Let's move to the defensive end group. Again, another slew of great talent here for the Eagles. Looking at this, of course, Brandon Graham will be back. Excited to see what Derek Barnett can do coming off of that injury. A lot of great talent here for the Eagles as well.
Yeah, it's just a very competitive group. We talked about Brandon Graham earlier in the show. Derek Barnett coming off of injury. You still have a young player there in Josh Sweat. So they've got some talent there that they're really, really excited about. Another group that will be very competitive. But again, you can always add talent every place along the roster. We talked about the job that Howie Roseman, Joe Douglas, everybody did this offseason where they've got options going into this draft. So defensive end certainly on the table.
Well, and we know that the Eagles love to draft along both lines of scrimmage, and especially Howie in his tenure in the first round. A lot of defensive linemen that he's taken there. So we are looking at an Albert Breer pick, a close personal friend of mine.
Right.
Again, Mississippi State, Fran. You picked all the guys from Mississippi State are apparently going to be considered by some of these analysts for the Eagles here. So let's take a look at Montez Sweat.
Yeah, this is Montez Sweat over on the right side of your screen, going up against another NFL draft prospect in Dalton Reisner. He has great length, and he uses his length very, very well. You see him get into the pads of Reisner. He's trying to run the arc here, but he does a great job of understanding the quarterback's going to step up in the pocket. He can't let that happen, so he spins off of Reisner, and then you see him just chase the quarterback. Does a great job of hunting the quarterback. Really, a lot of sacks, Amy, happen that way in the NFL. It's not always going to be clean. It's going to be those second-effort sacks that result in a lot of your production. Montez Sweat was one of the most productive pass rushers in the entire country, was one of the leaders in sacks in the SEC over the last 2 seasons. So I think when you look at Montez Sweat, you check a lot of boxes. He can play the run. He's got size, blew up the combine, outstanding athletic workout out in Indianapolis. So Montez Sweat certainly is a guy going to hear his name called here in the first round.
Well, and especially with linemen, you always want to see them against top competition. So awesome to see what Sweat did there against Dalton Reisner, like you said, another top draft prospect. Of course, that was our film breakdown, but you know who's also been breaking down a lot of film over the last year? The Eagles front office, and especially Joe Douglas. Our Eagles insider Dave Spadaro sat down with Joe for an exclusive interview. That's coming up after this break, so stick with us. Welcome back to Eagles Draft Central, presented by Dietz and Watson. Fran, that clock is ticking. We are getting closer and closer. I'm so excited.
It's that time of year, and I want to say it's like Christmas morning, like we talked about earlier, but it's Christmas night. Like I've been waiting. This has been the longest day of the year, waiting for this moment.
Yeah, I mean, people's lives are about to change,
Yes,
and many lives in this building as well. Speaking of which, Joe Douglas, this I'm sure is one of his favorite days as well. Our Eagles insider Dave Spadaro sat down with Joe Douglas to talk about the ins and outs of the draft process. Here's the exclusive feature.
Joe, you've had a coaching staff that's intact once again, and I wonder how that helps you, your staff, find the right fits for these schemes.
We've had an opportunity to be together for 3 years, so we've gotten to know each other. We've gotten to know the likes and dislikes and the type of player that we all gravitate towards through the process, through the draft process, and that continuity, and it's helped us get on the same page come draft day.
I know, you, I'm sure, run into them, I run into them, people who think they can evaluate talent because they watch film. But it's really got to be difficult to take a 20, 21, 22-year-old kid and project them into a man's game. Is that the most difficult part of the whole thing?
It is a difficult part, Dave, and sometimes you're looking at 20-year-old underclassmen that are coming out, and so if you're walking into a school like South Dakota State and trying to see how a player is going to compare against these players that are here in the NFL, but how would they do against Alabama, how they do in the Southeast Conference. It's a challenge, and our scouts have done a great job at that over the years. But you're right. You're not always comparing apples to apples in terms of projecting players in the league.
What are the exact characteristics that you look for? What does it take to be a Philadelphia Eagle?
We talk about this a lot, and the characteristics that we're looking for. Guys that are just passionate about football. I mean, they love the game. Not just what the game brings them, but they love the game, and they're constantly, constantly competitive. They're going to be able to face any situation, face any kind of adversity. They're going to be able to compete and withstand it.
Joe, do you think it's fair to evaluate a draft after 1 year? And if not, is there a period of time that you use to look back and evaluate?
Right. I think. I don't think it's fair to evaluate a draft after 1 year. I think it's okay to be excited about guys, and obviously there's a few guys to be excited about in our recent drafts. But I think, as we've seen in the past, guys develop at different rates. Guys face different adversities. There's a lot of circumstances that young players have, whether it's opportunity, whether it's injury. You have to evaluate it almost on a case-by-case basis. And not only do we evaluate how we've done in the draft, but we evaluate, how we've done not only for the Philadelphia Eagles, but around the league, because we scout hundreds, thousands of players each year. So, normally, like last year, we only selected 5. Right now, we have 7 picks. So it's important for us to go through and self-scout. 7 picks, but 3 of them in the top 57. What does that mean to you? What kind of opportunity is that for the Eagles? It's a great opportunity to have 3 picks within the top 57 in the draft. It's a great opportunity to bolster our roster and really find some difference makers moving forward. So what is kind of the overall mantra of the Eagles heading into the draft? You might get bored by me saying this, Dave, but I still think it's best player available moving forward. We're going to find the best fit for the Philadelphia Eagles. Is that difficult to do just in general from a year-to-year basis? I mean, I would imagine there are teams that don't come into this draft with the feel that their roster is as thoroughly complete as the Eagles feel. As far as the roster, and we ideally would like to approach each draft with having a roster that is almost bulletproof when it comes to needs. So ideally, that's what you try to do. That doesn't always happen each year, but it certainly helps from a strategic vantage point. Joe, why do you love the evaluation part of it so much? When did you kind of fall in love with being a scout and doing this for a living? Initially, I love the behind-the-scenes aspect of roster building. Obviously, behind the scenes has now moved to center stage almost, with the spotlight being on the draft now. But I was always intrigued by going into school with a blank sheet of paper. You're starting from scratch on these guys, and it's your job to paint the picture of exactly what this player is and how this player is going to help your team, how he fits within the team, who he beats out, maybe who he's not better than. So I always love the ability to paint that picture and meet different coaches, meet different coaching staffs, and the great tradition that is college football, and going to some of these games and being around some of these atmospheres. I mean, there's just so much to love about the scouting process, and that's just the regular season, and then getting through the combine and these all-star games and seeing these guys get together, seeing small school guys get together with SEC guys and seeing them get a chance to compete for a week in Mobile. I could go on and on, but those are some of the highlights.
It sounds like there's so much data. I mean, for the fans, can you kind of quantify? Is it possible even to quantify how much data you have to sift through to come down to that final grade or that final evaluation?
Our scouts do a tremendous job of gathering information. They do a great job of evaluating players, but they're able to get into the school, develop contacts, get unbelievable information on these guys. Our analytics staff does a great job of getting data and helping us through this process. So it's hard to quantify just how much data we have on one single player. I mean, when you come into our draft board, you're going to see a player card, but what you don't see are the hours and hours of work that's gone into that one player. So that's a unique thing.
What will the feeling be like in general on Monday morning? You come into the office, smoke is cleared, you've settled things, you look up and you take a look at the new Philadelphia Eagles. What will make you happy at that time?
I'll be happy is that we were able to go through another draft. We were all able to come together, speak our mind, do the work, speak our mind, have a setting where we can maybe not always agree on the exact same things, but we come to the best players for the Philadelphia Eagles. And knowing that we did it together, and knowing that we did it with the scouting staff, with the coaching staff, analytics. There's a lot of people that have had an opportunity to meet the players throughout this draft process, and then we're able to all come together and do something special. So that's always a great feeling the day after the draft.
And then how long before the realization occurs that you've got a lot more work to do for 2019, and oh, by the way, 2020 is right around the corner? Yeah,
not long after that euphoria, I guess. Not long after that, you're immediately thinking about the 2020 draft for next year. And all right, we got to get going. I mean, these guys have, most of these guys have already gotten 3 seasons under their belt. We got a lot of work to do. Let's catch up. Let's get going. Let's get our draft board going. Let's get our spring scouting going. And I know our scouts are that excited too to get going on the next draft. So, yeah, you don't sit around and you don't sit on your laurels for too long.
Joe, thank you very much. Good luck.
Thanks, Dave.
Weekend.
Appreciate it.
3 picks in the top 57 is a huge opportunity. I love to hear Joe Douglas say that. I love the excitement and the aggressiveness there.
3 words, 3 picks, 3 words. Best player available.
Yeah, I love the philosophy. And of course, we know Howie Roseman, we know Joe Douglas, but it's not just those two that are involved in the scouting process for the Eagles. Player personnel coordinator Casey Weidel is a huge part of that. He was on the road at the Senior Bowl, and we have an exclusive look at the entire behind-the-scenes process of the Senior Bowl with Casey Weidel. Check it out.
Great discrepancies, or not all-star, like why they declined.
Okay.
She said she had some updates.
So if you take it out and then you add the blue star just being like a pop measurable, that's pretty much what that is anyway, right?
Yeah.
That's super smart.
I'm kind of behind the scenes. I'm the operations guy that kind of is always a couple weeks ahead. Also during the fall, I take care of the database, basically all the transfers, all the juniors in the system, make sure no one's missing.
Oh, hell yeah.
Senior Bowl, we start prepping in December for it. We'll start tagging guys in the system, and then we'll figure out formal interviews. So once we figure out the formal interviews, our scouting assistants will start making hit tapes on them. So that starts early, and then we'll make books. The scouts are on the road doing a great job getting background and information on the guys, but it's our first time actually talking to the players. This is a place where we get all our questions answered. If we have something to follow up, we either get them individually or a formal interview. And this is our first time to really get to know the person because, again, we're trying to find Eagles. All right, this is our formal interview room here at the Senior Bowl. We bring guys in every night, usually 5 to 6, sometimes 7. We'll bring them in to kind of interview them about 20 minutes. We'll have all our directors in here, Howie, Joe, Andy, Anthony Patch, Ian Cunningham, and usually our area scout And then our cross-check scout will be allowed in here as well because they've known the guys. They've been through them. They know all the background. So they know questions to kind of ask them too. In the interviews, I'm just making sure that I'm taking notes, critical factors that they hit on, just kind of little tidbits that might sway in a good way or sway in a bad way. So basically by doing formal interviews here, we get more guys covered. Because come April, we want to know everyone front and back, personality-wise, that who we're getting in our building when we draft that player.
205 pounds, 205.
5112. 5112.
Basically here, this is just an extended version of the Senior Bowl. Some guys you'll see certain weights. You'll be interested to see like guys that come in disappointed their weight was a little low. It's interesting to see at the Senior Bowl if they can get that weight back up.
240 pounds, 240.
The philosophy I go off of the Senior Bowl is, have a plan, work the plan, but plan for the unexpected. One thing that I think is interesting down at the Senior Bowl, that we do battlefield promotions. Like we'll find a guy that really stands out day 1 or 2, and day 3 we'll bring him in formal interview because he stood out. We need to know this guy. We need to know if he's an Eagle or not, because he's standing out here against great competition. He's going to be worth something come draft time.
An awesome behind-the-scenes look at the Senior Bowl there with Casey Weidel. And Fran, it's not just Casey that was there. I thought it was interesting to see that the entire Eagles front office staff is there representing the Eagles and going through this scouting process, evaluating these prospects. There's so much that goes into this that people don't realize.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody knows that you have Howie Roseman, you have Joe Douglas, Andy Weidel, the coaching staff obviously very involved as well, led by Doug Peterson. But then you get to the next tier, and you've got the 2 scouting directors with Ian Cunningham and Anthony Patch. You've got a whole team of college scouts, 6, 7, 8 college scouts that all have designated areas of the country. Your pro scouting staff, they're all going to be involved in the college scouting process.
And of course, Howie Roseman driving that bus there for the Eagles. He's been at this a long time, since 2010 to be exact, driving the bus. And 8 picks in the first round, traded out last year in 2018. But here's a list of his first round selections, and a very impressive list. 6 of these guys, 6 out of 8 of these guys, integral in the Eagles Super Bowl win, Fran. You got to be happy with that success rate there.
I think you just look at the very first one, right? I mean, Brandon Graham was the author of maybe one of the best plays in Eagles history with his sack fumble of Tom Brady in the 4th quarter of Super Bowl 52. Derek Barnett, the most recent one, obviously was on the receiving end of that forced fumble.
And,
but
there's a lot to be seen with Derek Barnett as well. I think he's just getting started.
Absolutely. And then you've got 2 of the guys that are maybe at the top of their position in the NFL, or certainly right in the discussion. You've got Lane Johnson, Fletcher Cox, obviously Carson Wentz. We know what kind of talent he is. So, I think you look at this list, you're never going to bat 1,000. There's always going to be misses in the NFL draft. You look at all the best teams in the league, that is going to be the case. But if the more cracks to the apple you have, the more success you're going to have. The Eagles have shown that in the first round of the NFL draft, they're able to have success. And going into this draft, that's why we've talked about, having multiple second-round picks will be a huge aid to them. And let's take a look at some of those picks, I think.
Yeah, well, you always hear them say doubles off the wall, right?
Yes,
you're not always going to
right.
hit home runs, but if you can hit doubles off the wall, that will build a championship. I would say looking at that list, it was probably a little better than doubles off the wall. Here's the list of the Eagles 2019 draft picks. Of course, that number 25 pick, where we will be breaking it down as soon as that happens in the first round. 2 picks in the second round. You just mentioned it, Fran. 53rd, the trade, the Lamar Jackson trade for the Ravens last year, and 57th overall. A lot of value to be had in that second round. I'm especially intrigued with the 53rd and 57th pick for the Eagles.
If you're a fan and you're watching at home, okay, I want you to go, and after every team makes a selection, not on Thursday night, but Friday night after the draft, you're going to hear them all talk about their pick, and they're going to say, we felt really, really good about having that pick in the second round. That's where we really felt there was the most value in this draft. And they say that year after year after year because it's true. Day 2 of the draft is really where you're going to get a lot of value. And for the Eagles to come into this draft with 2 picks in the second round, I think that gives them a leg up on some of these other teams.
And of course, those later rounds, you always find possibly those hidden gems. So the Eagles, a couple of later picks there that I'm especially excited to see. Last year it was Jordan Mailata, who we are still very excited about, very intrigued with. That's going to be a lot to watch. 2 more picks for the Eagles this year than they had last year when they had 5.
Yeah, and I think when you get to that day 3 of the draft, it's really all about acquiring more talent and building the meat of your roster. Yeah, you want to be able to hit in round 1, you want to be able to hit in day 2, but then when you get into the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th round, think about some of the players, Amy. I think, last year, Avonte Maddox. The year before, you've got guys like Jalen Mills, Big V. Jason Kelsey was a 6th-round pick. So many of the players that you're hoping to be able to build the
That's
meat
a good
of your
list of names.
Right there.
Yeah.
I mean, you're trying to build the meat of your roster through the course of the 3rd day of the draft. The best teams do well on day 3.
Of course, we will be going live at Pick 10 to answer all of your questions related to the draft, so please do not hesitate to send them our way because we are ready to go with all of your answers, and then we will be back right here locked and loaded when the Eagles are on the clock at Pick 25, ready to analyze, slice and dice. We've got our coffee, we've got our water. Let's just get buckled in, ready for this wild ride, and we will be here all week long throughout the draft process. Keep it right here with PhiladelphiaEagles.com on all of our channels. Not only will we be live with our instant reactions and analysis, we've got exclusive interviews, we've got features you won't see anywhere else, so be sure to tune in throughout the entire week for all of that behind the scenes coverage at PhiladelphiaEagles.com and all of our channels. You don't want to miss it.